Welcome to PsychoMinds, the great ideas of psychology explained clearly and backed by science. At the beginning of the 20th century, psychology was undergoing an important transformation. Many scientists started to believe that human behavior could be studied objectively, just like any other natural phenomenon. Among these researchers was a Russian physiologist named Ivan Pavlov. Interestingly, Pavlov was not originally interested in psychology. His research focused on the digestive system of animals, particularly how dogs produce saliva when they were given food. During his experiments, Pavlov noticed something unexpected. The dogs began to salivate even before the food was presented. This happened when they heard the footsteps of the assistant who usually brought the food. That small observation caught Pavlov's attention. He began to suspect that the dogs were learning to associate certain events with the arrival of food. From that moment on, Pavlov started investigating how organisms learn through associations. This discovery eventually became one of the most influential concepts in psychology. The phenomenon became known as classical conditioning. Classical conditioning shows that an organism can learn to respond to a stimulus that originally produced no reaction. This idea would later become one of the foundations of modern scientific psychology. To study this phenomenon more precisely, Pavlov designed an experiment that would become one of the most famous in the history of psychology. At the beginning of the experiment, the dogs naturally salivated when they received food. The food was called the unconditioned stimulus because it naturally produced a reaction. The salivation produced by the dogs was known as the unconditioned response. Next, Pavlov introduced a new element into the experiment: the sound of a bell. At first, the bell produced no reaction in the dogs. It was simply a neutral stimulus. However, Pavlov began ringing the bell just before presenting the food. After repeating this process many times, something remarkable happened. The dogs started to salivate as soon as they heard the bell, even when no food was presented. This meant the animals had learned to associate the sound of the bell with the arrival of food. The bell, which had previously been neutral, became a conditioned stimulus. And the salivation triggered by the bell became known as the conditioned response. Pavlov's experiment revealed one of the most important principles of learning. Organisms can learn to associate events that occur together in the environment. This type of learning does not occur only in animals. It also plays a major role in human behavior. For example, a person might feel anxious when entering a hospital if they previously had a painful medical experience there. In that case, the hospital becomes associated with feelings of fear or discomfort. Another common example involves music or smells. A simple song can suddenly bring back memories and emotions connected to a particular moment in life. This happens because our brain creates associations between experiences, emotions, and environmental stimuli. Classical conditioning shows that much of learning happens automatically. Often we form these associations without even realizing it. This principle helps psychologists better understand how habits, emotions, and behavioral patterns can develop over time. Pavlov's discoveries had a profound impact on the development of scientific psychology. His work strongly influenced the emergence of an important school of thought, known as behaviorism. One of the psychologists who expanded these ideas was John B. Watson. Watson argued that psychology should focus on observable behavior, rather than invisible mental processes. Classical conditioning demonstrated that behavior could be studied scientifically through controlled experiments. This approach opened the door to new research about learning, behavior, and emotional responses. Later, psychologists also applied these principles to therapeutic practices. For example, some psychological treatments use conditioning techniques to help people overcome phobias or reduce anxiety responses. In this way, a discovery made in a laboratory with dogs ended up transforming the scientific understanding of human behavior. More than a century later, Pavlov's experiment is still considered one of the most important studies in the history of psychology. It demonstrated that learning can occur through associations between stimuli. Today, this principle is applied in many different areas. In clinical psychology, it helps explain how fears and phobias can develop. In education, it contributes to understanding how people learn new behaviors. In advertising, companies often create emotional associations to influence how consumers perceive products and brands. Even in everyday life, classical conditioning influences many aspects of our behavior. The work of Ivan Pavlov revealed that learning can occur through surprisingly simple mechanisms. Thanks to this discovery, scientists gained a deeper understanding of how the environment can shape our reactions, habits, and emotions. For this reason, Pavlov's experiment remains one of the fundamental ideas for understanding human behavior. Here at PsychoMinds, psychology is presented in a simple, responsible, and science-based way. Subscribe to PsychoMinds for more insights into psychology.